Lucinda is a certified home energy assessor and with Going Green Solutions. And she's passionate about sustainability in every aspect of her life, as well as founding Going Green Solutions and building it to what it is today. She's an accredited scorecard home energy efficiency assessor, for which she recently won the Scorecard Champion Assessor Award, which is brilliant. She presents on a range of sustainability, green purchasing, and energy efficiency topics around Melbourne. Lucinda will be discussing practical low-cost solutions for making your home more comfortable and lowering energy costs. Thank you, Lucinda.
Thank you, and it's great to be here. Thanks for inviting me. Thank you for the introduction, Sophie, and looking forward to sharing some inspirations with you all. I'm going to be talking about energy efficiency upgrades you can make to your building shell. First of all, what is an energy efficient home? I think it's really important to have that clear before we start to talk about what we can do to be more energy efficient, because there's a bit of confusion about it. Some people think it means just being really frugal and potentially expecting to not be comfortable, but it's not about that at all. What we want is a house that is naturally just pretty good at keeping its temperature most of the time without needing active heating or cooling to keep yourself comfortable. And so that's what we really want to do when we're looking at the building shell. This means that it's going to be low cost to run when you do actually need heating or cooling, that you don't need them for very long. And then those two things, the comfort and the low cost to run, of course, means you're reducing your carbon emissions. So that's our goal. And there are three main aspects to that. There's the building shell, how well it keeps heat in during winter and out in summer. And then there's appliances, and then how you use them both. I'm going to be talking about the building shell and how to use that to your best advantage. And then Danielle will talk about appliances and how to use those to your best advantage. We'll begin with zoning. And zoning is the concept of treating each area of your home as a different zone, especially in terms of heating and cooling. If you have a ducted whole of house system, this becomes more challenging and it's much harder to achieve, well, sort of impossible. But the reason it's so important to think about zoning is that it's often the simplest way that you can both reduce your costs for keeping comfortable and also just be more comfortable. It's easier to manage the temperature of one zone and keep it exactly as you like it than trying to do it across a whole house. It's also about zoning areas out that might be problematic, which could be a really drafty bathroom or something like that. So thinking about zoning is really important if you're going to be upgrading any heating or cooling, to choose ones that you can use zones with. Adding additional zoning can be as simple as putting in a lightweight curtain with a telescopic pole, that's the image in the middle, or like a Japanese, lightweight Japanese curtain. Or sometimes the image in the right shows draft ceiling and internal door, which could be to a drafty area. So there's plenty of ways to do it, and they don't have to be difficult or even permanent. You can have just temporary zoning. Draft proofing is another really important one and one of the lower cost ones. Some things are easy to do, others are a bit trickier to get right, but there's a lot of really great information, especially on places like Sustainability Victoria, where this photo is from that shows you a bunch of the common places that you find drafts. Why do drafts make a difference? Well, there's two main reasons, and one is that you are literally losing air or gaining air if you have big holes in your building shell. And so if you can imagine that you might be losing all of the air in your living room, say 4 times an hour, that means that if you're heating that living room, it's having to reheat 4 times instead of perhaps once. The other part of it is that drafts feel cold. Just like when you've got a ceiling fan on you in summer, it helps you feel cooler. It's not actually cooling the air, but it feels cooler. And in winter, if you're sitting somewhere with a draft on you, you will also feel cold. And that makes you want to turn up the temperature of your heating just to be comfortable. And so that's a double whammy. You're losing the air and feeling cold, so you want to put the temperature up. With draft sealing, I want to acknowledge that there is some free draft sealing that is available free under the Victorian Energy Upgrade Scheme. It's not always great products or installation. The quality of both is not always good. So it's something you could consider, but otherwise, if you're wanting to do something yourself, you could look at the EcoMaster website. They have excellent draft sealing products and lots of good DIY videos on how to apply them. And there are professional draft sealers as well. Open chimneys, if you've got one of them, it's definitely something you need to look at. I won't talk through these because of the time restraints, but if you have an open chimney, have a bit of a look online and see what you can do about it. There's a lot of drafts that you can seal just with a caulking gun and filler rod. That's a couple of examples. There's everything from wall vents, skirting vents, and plumbing and electrical penetrations. That's one of the easier to achieve ones, I think. There's a lot of drafts you can seal with weather strips. These are also offered under VEU, but these ones I think you're often better to do yourself because it can be quite tricky to actually fill the right gaps. You'd be looking at external doors, internal doors, and windows for these. Unsealed exhaust fans is another with the free draft stoppers covering them. The only one that doesn't apply is the Tastic heat lamp because they're too hot to cover. So there's other ways of approaching that. Vented windows and skylights. If any of you have a 60s or 70s home, you might have these, and they're really big drafts and well worth doing something about. And evaporative cooler vents is another one. There's free seals under VEU, only the small square. Just a quick note about draft sealing. Be careful draft sealing everything if you have a gas or wood space heater, just because of the risk of carbon monoxide in the air. So if you do have those, make sure you're not draft sealing everything. So you've got a bit of airflow, maybe put in a carbon monoxide monitor and keep your appliances working well. Sealing and underfloor insulation. The key with these is the graph on the top shows you that the impact that the R value of your insulation has on heat transfer. R value refers to resistance value to heat transfer. And if you look at the top left-hand side of that graph, you'll see the heat transfer of a ceiling with no insulation is really high. But once you start getting even down to R3, you've really made a big dint on that heat transfer. And so that's what you want to aim for, is at least R3 and upwards. Gaps have a really big impact on the quality of how your insulation is working. So this graph shows that if you have 5% gaps, you halve the functional value of how it's working. And the reason this is important and also possibly a low-cost upgrade is because the most common issue that you'll see in a roof is gaps that are left by tradespeople once they've been in there. They go in and install things and then just leave all the insulation lying around. And that's, of course, gaps, which means you've no longer got good insulation. If you see something like this in your roof, that insulation's perfectly good. It just needs relaying. So can you do it yourself? You can. It's not a very nice job, and there is certain hazards that you'd want to be aware of, but yes, it's a possibility. Underfloor insulation is something that can be done yourself. It's sort of low to average cost. And these are the two ways it's usually applied. One is with staples to the outer edges, and one is with strapping. It depends what sort of underfloor you have, whether that would go on your list of upgrades. The more ventilation there is, like this house, you can see it's got big open underfloor, lots and lots of airflow. And if that house just had floorboards, then that underfloor insulation becomes a really useful thing to do. But if you're not in this situation, it could perhaps be shunted down the list a little bit. And the easiest way to do it is to buy it in one long roll, which EcoMaster sell, and probably other people do too. And that way you can just spread it out between your floor joists and staple it along the way. And then windows is the last main thing that has low cost options. Window coverings are incredibly valuable, and I think they're really underestimated as a way as a relatively low-cost way to improve how your windows are stopping heat transferring in and out. This graph shows the impact of particular kinds of window coverings on heat transfer. The first green, lime green mark is showing a standard double glazed window with no window covering at all. And then the second one shows a single glazed window with a heavy lined curtain and a pelmet. So you can see that the single lined one with a really good covering is actually more thermally efficient than the double glazing. I'm not suggesting not to get double glazing, but just not to underestimate the importance of the window coverings as well. Really, you want to improve both the glazing and the window coverings if you can. But window coverings can be low cost because, you know, curtains pretty easy to find in secondhand stores. If you're renting, that's going to be no problem. You can put them up and take them with you when you leave. The key with a window covering, what makes it effective, is how well it reduces airflow across the glass. And that's why heavy lined curtains work well. Also honeycomb blinds that are installed right inside the window reveal, which really reduces any airflow. And the two images on the right-hand side show what's called invisible pelmets. So they're sort of taken from above the curtain, but they show that it just blocks the gap between the window frame and the curtain to stop the convection current either going up or down. The Roman blinds on the left, they usually have a pelmet incorporated into the top of them. And then the one on the right is something I saw recently at someone's house where they had ceiling tracks and curtains attached to those. And they worked really well because then your roof is pretty much acting as a pelmet. With glazing, the goal with any glazing upgrade is to add an air gap between two panes. If you have the budget, then getting specially made double glazed panels which have a vacuum and, you know, argon fill and things like that is wonderful. If you can't afford that, it doesn't mean though that you can't still add an air gap in a much lower cost way. One of the ways is called secondary glazing, and this is where you leave your window, your frame and glass exactly as they are, and you just introduce a second panel to that window, and it's usually made of clear acrylic. The image on the right is showing, it's from an article from Renew magazine, and it's showing someone who has purchased clear acrylic, cut it to size, and is screwing it onto the timber frame. And the image on the left is Eco Glaze, which is a kit. It's not a kit. They do DIY, so you can measure up your windows and they send you all the bits and pieces you need to install it yourself, but you end up with a nice secondary glazed window. Then there's things like bubble wrap, which works remarkably well and is a perfect thing for renters or really low income households. And the image above that is Clear Comfort, which is a membrane that you stick a double-sided tape onto a window frame and then the Clear Comfort on top of that and shrink it with a hairdryer. And it sounds really strange, but it does create an air gap and it will really slow down the heat transfer through your windows. And one last option for the windows is removable panels. This is another article from Renew where they have made the frame out of fly screen edgings and then used a clear plastic tablecloth that is stretched out between them. And the images on the right actually have these panels installed into the frame. So even though it sounds sort of dodgy, it actually looks pretty good. And she invented it because she moved into a rental and wanted to improve the glazing, but obviously couldn't do anything long term. So this is a really good option as a first port of call. And then you can perhaps build on that with actual double glazed windows later. Then there's external shading. When it comes to summer heat gain and that being a problem, external shading is absolutely the key. Internal window coverings, curtains and things will help a little bit, but the external shading is really what's going to stop your house heating up. It can be anything physical that stops the sun hitting the glass. One of my favorites is deciduous vines, like this image on the left. And on the right, you'll just see the typical canvas awning, but you could also put up a shade sail or a shade cloth roller blind, anything really. And then the opposite of that is it's sort of related to windows. I wasn't sure where it fitted in this presentation, but it's about encouraging winter sun, because it can give us a lot of passive solar heat and really warm us up. Sometimes in houses I've been to, it's been as simple as perhaps trimming some shrubs that are growing across north-facing windows in the winter to allow that sun in, and then in summer they can grow up and shelter you. But just thinking about how to get winter sun inside as well as you can. And then one last thing is natural ventilation, where you're using your windows to encourage natural airflow through the house. Just, we were saying about the fan helps you cool down. It's the same thing with natural ventilation. Just having that air flowing across will purge the heat out of the house, but also cool you down. Just the poll, I was curious if anyone has had any upgrades done under the Victorian Energy Upgrade Scheme and how they had found that. I know I have a lot of different responses from people that I go to visit, and I'd love to hear what you've found. Questions are welcome, but not just now. If you could just hold on until after Danielle speaks, and then we'll answer questions together. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you. Thank you, Lucinda. That was amazing and brilliant time. Brilliant time.
I know.
Danielle King is the founder, director and senior advisor at Green Moves. She is a highly experienced and respected expert in energy efficiency and efficient buildings. Danielle is an accredited residential efficiency scorecard assessor and educates in this field. She's presented many seminars on energy efficiency, electrification and sustainable building. So over to you, Danielle. Thank you.
Thanks. So this is the sort of thing that we're going to be talking about. We're going to cover just where the general energy use around the home goes, and then these other things, heating, cooling, hot water, refrigeration particularly, and so on. So these are all related to the appliances that are in the home. And just bear in mind too that the building shell and the things that Lucinda talked about do tend to impact a lot, particularly on the heating and cooling side of things. So we're going to focus now on, where does it all go and what options are there to minimise costs, with a view as well to going all electric, because as we know, the all electric side of things is much more efficient than gas can be at the moment. So this is a graph that we got from Sustainability Victoria. It was just updated recently in 2021 when they redid the baseline study. But this is where the average costs go. So all your energy bills, this is where it's going in terms of appliance use, it's particularly during winter. So you can see that the majority of heating in Victoria, the majority of the cost of energy bills in Victoria is due to heating. And that's because, we are still primarily a heating climate. So we do tend to use heating a lot more in winter than what we would use cooling in summer. And then on average, we have water heating, which is followed by fridges and freezers, and then a whole range of other things that, not quite so much, but certainly contribute. And each household will be slightly different, but this is where the majority of costs go on average. So in my session today, I'm going to focus primarily on heating and cooling, but more on heating, a bit about water heating. And then when it comes to the other appliances, I've got a section that will cover off things like refrigeration first, because that's quite key, cooking, lighting, and other sorts of things that you can do to be more efficient. So talking about heating and cooling, I'm going to focus primarily on the different types, usage of them, and succession planning, because these are devices that are not cheap to put into a home. And when they go, you're locking yourself in for about another 10 or 15, 20 years. So this is a graph again from 2023 from Sustainability Victoria. They've thankfully updated all their stuff recently, so we're very grateful for that. And they've taken into account, the changes in energy costs and so on. And this particular one here gives you an overview of the different types of heating systems that you'll find in a house. So, and rates them in terms of, cost to run, which correlates back to the general efficiency of the appliance. So you'll see that the top three there are actually, in fact, the top four are all gas systems, and the ones at the bottom are all electric systems. So that kind of gives a very instant sort of view that, you know, yes, electricity is way more efficient than gas, even though there's a significant difference in the price gap. That's where it's coming in at. So we'll still find there's an awful lot of houses around Melbourne that have gas ducted systems, not so many that have like separate reverse cycle systems per room. So the gas ducted systems, as Lucinda mentioned, because they tend to only have one zone, or if you're lucky, two zones, and they might work, they are quite inefficient for a couple of reasons. One, because they're doing the whole house, not just the area that you're in, but also because the ducting in the systems in these things is never particularly great. It will, you know, when it's first and when it's new, it's fine. But over time, and by over time, I mean 10, 15 years, the glues and the tapes that they use to put the ducting onto the actual vents starts to wear and erode and starts to fail. You can get critters under the house or in the roof that, you know, eat away at your ducting. I saw some that recently that had even made a nest out of the insulation in some of the ducting that wasn't even that old. Or quite often they just come off and they can be hitting your roof space or your underfloor, and you have cold spots in the house as a result of that. So none of that is efficient. The benefit of the reverse cycle units, the ones that are not ducted, is that there is no ducting and everything's just plumbing. So that's why the multi-head splits and the general reverse cycle split systems per room are a lot more efficient, because they don't have those losses and they just have much better bang for buck in terms of energy use. So this kind of supports the whole thing about zoning, because if you have an air conditioner or a split system in one room and you're using just that room, then you can just close that room off, use it, and you're not wasting all that energy heating areas of the house that are not being used. So that's really covers off the main things. There are other things like space heaters, gas space heaters, and electric panel heaters and things. I'll cover that in a minute. So generally speaking, the one thing I want you to take away from this one is this. So reverse cycle units, whether they're multi-head or whether they're single room split systems, are the most efficient heating and cooling, as it happens, system that you could have. And gas ducted systems are the least efficient. So if you have a gas ducted system at the moment, one of the key things is to, if you know roughly how old it is, start to think about the transition plan and getting off that gas appliance. Had a customer the other day whose gas heating system still probably got a good 5 or 10 years left in it, but they were wanting to get off gas and they don't actually need to have the whole house ducted. So they're actually putting in a plan now where they're putting a reverse cycle unit in the most used rooms first, so their main living and dining area, and they're going to put in a door to zone that area off, and they'll put one in the main bedroom, and then they're going to phase in air condition, like reverse cycle split systems across other areas of the house as they feel they need them. Try it for a year, and then if they don't need it, then they're just going to disconnect the gas ducted system and remove the vents. So, you know, there are different ways of planning to get rid of these appliances. You don't have to do it like big bang. You can just phase things in over time, which is a lot more cost effective and a lot more practical for most of us. And when you're looking at the air conditioners, especially the reverse cycle units or even any heating system, they should be rated. This is the ratings from the reverse cycle units. They have gone from the old just basic, you know, heating and cooling rating to a little bit more complicated, where they've divided the ratings up, the energy efficiency per zone of the country. So we're in the cooling zone, which is the bottom one here. You'll see it noted in black. So whenever you're looking at a reverse cycle air conditioner or a multi-head system and you're looking at the star rating, in Victoria, you want to get ones with more stars on the heating because we use that more than the cooling, and look at the rating that's in the black in the cold zone, because that's our zone. Now, there's plenty of these around. These are probably the most inefficient forms of heating you can get in your house. A lot of these appliances here, in fact, I can't see any on this page here that use less than your reverse cycle unit in a room. So one of the things that people don't understand is that most of these will use anywhere from 1,000 to 2,500 watts of energy an hour. Your average split system in a room will use at the moment 300 to 400 watts an hour to keep the whole room warm. Much more efficient. So if you've got any of these, minimize the use of them because they're not efficient. And if you have a reverse cycle unit in the same room, use that instead. Another good option, and I know this is one of Lucinda's favourites, is personal heating devices. So if you have got a ducted system and you don't have other things that are efficient to keep yourself warm. There are quite an amazing array of different types of heating things these days. You've got blankets, you've got, bed, things that go on your bed, you've got jackets, socks, chairs, all sorts of things these days. So, and they're pretty cheap to buy and they're pretty cheap to run. So something worthwhile if it's just you in the house and you don't want to turn the whole system on for a few hours. Something like this is actually quite a good option. So when it comes to heating, generally speaking, so the first thing I would say is, look at the free stuff first. So dress appropriately. So if you need a jacket or if it's getting a bit chilly, put on a jacket. I have got a friend who sadly likes the whole house to be 22 degrees every time, whether she's got a jacket on or not, and her bills are horrendous. And it's just a matter of your choice. But if you dress appropriately, and in winter, as Lucinda mentioned, if you let the sun hit the glass, it will help warm the house. It's, passive heating. It's kind of like when you get into a car, like on a cold day, it might be 10 or 12 degrees, but the sun's out and you get in your car and your car's really warm. That's what passive heating can do. And it can do that to your house as well if you let the sun hit the glass. Very beneficial. And the other thing, which has already been mentioned as well, is closing off unconditioned areas, creating buffer zones. It all helps to maintain heat, create zones, and make the house feel a bit more comfortable. Then look at using your personal heating devices. And then wherever possible, use zone systems first. Like, so do a reverse cycle unit in one room and just use that. In winter particularly, if you could set the temperature to something like 19 degrees and put a jumper on, it will be much more efficient than running the heater at 24 degrees. And every 1 degree less that it has to heat or even cool in summer, you'll save around 10% on the running cost of that appliance. So it's worth bearing that in mind. And then, of course, last but not least, the ducted systems, avoid them unless you need them. They're expensive. They do heat larger areas. So I would just say minimize the use of those. One of the things that I often advise people to do is, especially in winter, a lot of homes have reverse cycle units in some rooms as well as ducted systems. And I know what it's like trying to get a family up and moving first thing in the morning when it's cold. So I would say, maybe consider, instead of having your ducted systems on, for several hours in the morning and then several hours in the evening, just have it on for an hour or two in the morning so you can get everybody up and moving. And then in the evenings, don't use it. Try to prefer things like the reverse cycle units if you've got them, just because it's a little more efficient. There are some rebates. I'm not going to go through all this. This is really just so that's in the materials and you can have a look at it later. These rebates were updated in July this year. So if you're changing over from any of these appliances down on the left-hand side here to something more efficient, like a reverse cycle unit, these are the types of rebates you can expect to get, which is quite helpful when you're looking at the capital cost of things. So I've just got one slide on cooling. Passive cooling is obviously cheapest because it's free. So again, shade the windows and shade the walls and use natural ventilation. The next best thing then is fans. Fans, whether they're ceiling fans or pedestal fans, they're really cheap to buy and they're really cheap to run. And they'll give you up to that 6 degree cooling effect on the skin, which a lot of the time is enough to make you comfortable, on a hot day. And then if that's not enough, then you can look at the reverse cycle air conditioning. Again, set the temperature to 24 degrees so that every degree less that it has to cool, again, will save you about 10%. But if you set it at 24 degrees and then put a fan on as well, that'll give you that extra 6 degrees. It'll feel like it's 19 or 20 degrees, which is a really good combination of things, and it gives you the most cost-effective cooling for your home. Lucinda briefly talked about ventilation. I'll leave this in here. It's really just about opening doors on opposite sides, as she's mentioned. I've got a note in here about when should you ventilate. Look, ideally, in terms of keeping the air in the home cool, comfortable and fresh, daily if you can. But there is quite a point in terms of when not to ventilate. So if the winds are really high outside, or there's low external air quality because there's bushfires around or wind or pollen, or if it's due during extreme temperatures, keep the house closed up. It will be much more efficient and much more healthier inside if you do that. Right, now moving on to hot water systems. Again, yet another one, but not the same. This one is hot water systems across Victoria. And again, you'll see the gas, all the top ones up there are all gas storage. So gas storage, gas instant units, and electric storage is probably the only electric one up there that is not gas. But all these ones at the sort of the top half, and you'll see, I don't know if you can, oops. Don't know if you can see my cursor on this. So these ones all here, so you've got gas storage here, 4-star and a 5-star. The electric is this one here, the electric storage unit, which is your old resistive one. They're really, really inefficient. They're a bit better if you've got a solar booster panel on the top, but then all the ones down here are solar boosted and heat pumps. So when your hot water service fails, these are the things to start looking at to replace it with. Ideally, a heat pump. Might not be so simple if you're on a instant gas unit, because you may or may not have the space for it, but it's worth considering if you can. So look, the heat pumps and solar electric are the two best options there. But in terms of reducing costs for your hot water, simple things: time your showers. Remember back to your 155 litres per day, well, similar sort of thing. Time your showers and keep them to 3 minutes. Try to remember to use your dishwasher and run on full loads only. Don't pre-rinse anything. Wash all your clothes on cold cycles. When it comes to doing something that's a bit sort of more restrictive, you could do things like put flow restrictors into showers, and there are some free shower products available on the VU program. These appear to work from what I've seen. They're not quite as dodgy as the draft proofing product, but they are out there. And do things like ensure your basin and kitchen taps are about 6 litres a minute. Flow restrictors is also very cheap to buy. You can buy them anywhere for a couple of dollars, put them in, and it will save you quite a bit of money on your hot water costs. And then again, whenever it fails, start looking at transitioning across to a heat pump. There are rebates available for those. And if you've got any solar on your roof, try and program it to run while your solar's running. Now, this is the bit, and this is the main one I wanted to make sure we got covered today, which is refrigeration. So most fridges in a home, and they're all on 24 hours a day. Most of them are pretty efficient these days. But the way to keep them more efficient is to clean the seals on them regularly and aim for them to be about 80% full, because that gives you the best efficiency for the refrigerator. And whenever you go to replace it, make sure you get the right size and the most efficient one you can, because they're always on. The one bugbear we find are beer fridges. They're usually really old and they're usually really inefficient, and half the time the seals don't seal. They're sitting out in the garage with 1 tin of beer in it, and they're costing you a fortune to run. So if you have a beer fridge, no reason to get rid of it, but do turn it off when it's not needed. Maybe turn it back on over the Christmas and the holiday season when you've got family over, etc. And then empty it and consolidate your goods into one fridge and turn it off when it's not needed. You'll be surprised at how much that can save you. Chest freezers, on the other hand, if you've got a chest freezer, they're very efficient. And again, stacking to 80% for best efficiency on those. Right, TV and entertainment appliances. These are all pretty well star rated these days. I don't think you can see too many of these that don't have a star rating label on them somewhere. The usual thing is the more stars, the better. It's pretty easy to remember. When they're not in use, turn them off to reduce standby power. But one of the other things you can do is to turn the screen brightness down. So most computer screens and even TVs have an eco setting or a lower brightness, which can save quite a reasonable amount of energy, and you hardly notice a difference. So it's worth having a look at those. And of course, screensavers on computers and TVs and things, they don't save energy at all. They just put different pictures up. So it's not really worth looking at. But again, the same old story with succession planning. Always buy the right size and the most energy efficient one that you can, particularly if you use it a lot. There's a few tips here on cooking, like microwave, pressure cookers, slow cookers are really efficient ways of cooking. Induction cooktops are very efficient. And if you've not tried them, get a portable one and try it out. And even some libraries are now looking at lending them out. And if you do a lot of cooking in the oven, the fan force option does require a bit less energy and is a bit more efficient. And there's a few other cooking tips there, like share the oven, cook more than one thing at once, use lids on pans, and just use a small pan with a small amount of water, for example, when you're boiling things. Lighting, we've all been done over 1 million times with lighting, I think, but again, I still come across houses with incandescent globes in it and with halogens. Replace them when you can with LED equivalents. If you're in a rental property and the lighting in the home is inefficient, like if it's full of halogen downlights, just get a few LED lamps and use those instead. Dishwashers and laundry equipment, white goods. Again, they're generally, dishwashers and washing machines are pretty efficient. You really just need to use them right. And by that, I mean, run them on a full load, use eco or cold wash settings, and just don't run it when there's hardly anything in it. Most of these appliances do heat their own water these days, and they do it quite efficiently. 10 years ago, they weren't very good at it, but now they're very good at it. I will say thing about clothes dryers, though, clothes dryers use a lot of energy. So if you can minimize using clothes dryers, you will save that, will make quite a difference to your bills. If you have to have a clothes dryer, the most efficient one is the heat pump types, and they're coming down in price now. They were over $1,000 each, but I've seen some recently around the $500-600 mark. So that's getting better. But if you can, always air dry your clothes, either hang them on racks under somewhere where they won't get wet or somewhere near a heater. And then if you need to finish them off in the dryer, because like some people like their towels to be super soft, just partially dry them and then finish them off in the dryer. And the only thing I'll say with these is clean the filters regularly, otherwise so that they can continue to heat and dry clothes properly. Pools, I don't know if too many people here have pools, but simple things like ensuring the timers are set to the right number of hours per day in winter and then reduce the timing in summer. When the pump needs replacing, go to a really efficient heat pump. There is a star rating system for these, and you can find that online through the energy efficiency site. Pool heating type, solar heating, of course, is the most efficient. If you have it, use it. Heat pumps are next, and the gas, of course, is least efficient. If you've got solar on your roof, make sure you use it, because you don't get much money for it unless you're on the premium feed-in tariff. So use what you can when the sun is out. Program things like pool filter times in line with your maximum solar generation, and stagger your appliance use during the day. And maintain things. If you maintain your air conditioners and clean your filters on a regular basis, you'll find they last longer and they run more efficiently. And one of the last but not least things is to check your rates every 6 months, I would say. The rates do actually change in January and July every year. They're allowed to put them up. So check your rates through the Victorian Energy Compare website in February and March, and again in July and August of each year, to make sure you're always on the best tariff. So that's pretty well it. An efficient building shell combined with good appliances and well used results in a really comfortable and cost efficient home for you to run. And there is some more information on these websites here if you would like to do some research going forward. And that's it from me.
That was really good. I'm madly writing down so many notes there.
It'll be in the notes. I mean, the reason I put so much on the presentation is so that they gave some decent referral notes for people.
Absolutely. And I think it's that thing of everyone's at a different, got different houses, different stages, and there are certain things that just go, oh, they resonate. That's just, you think, yes, of course I need to do that. Where are those heated slippers? I've never seen that, where you put your feet in. It's like heated Ugg boots.
I saw them online. I just thought, you're kidding me. There are a couple of other
They're
really
amazing.
wonderful. And heated, you can get battery powered socks as well somewhere. I saw. I was like, you've got to be joking me. But yeah.
Those charts were all quite interesting, weren't they? So they're on Sustainability Victoria.
So Sustainability, I think they've moved them now, because they've got a report which you can download online. And if you can't find it, tell me and I'll see if I can dig it out, because they do tend to change their website frequently, and you go back to find something 6 months later and it's not there anymore. But they've done quite a lot of studies, and these graphs were in part of those studies. And they've been very, very helpful, especially from from the point of view of like people like me and Lucinda, where we go out and inform people, about where all the energy goes, and on average, and what can be done about it, and how much things cost to run, because it's an independent source, and it's just so much easier to to quantify things, and every house is different, and it's just one of those things. But the two do work very much together. So all the things that Lucinda talked about and all the appliances together, definitely combined. You would have seen then that all the things that are involved with the building shell that Lucinda talked about totally impact the heating and cooling costs of the home, 100%.
Yeah.
And so that's why it's quite important that you have, that you do the simple things like do your drafts and shade your windows when the right time is right, things like that, because it can make quite a difference.
Yeah. And I think the thing that you said that I think really resonates as well, I think a lot of people say, oh, I can't afford to do this, and it's a big job. But I liked what you said about that family who said, right, okay, we're just going to close off this space, which is the one we use mostly, put one system in and see how that goes. And there's that sense of I don't have to do, the big bang all at once. And I think that becomes more affordable and less frightening for a lot of
Less
people.
scary, yeah. Because you're not getting rid of anything, you're just trying something.
Yeah.
that's
Now
right.
I'm going to go on mute and I'm going to
Probably
hand over to Lynn, who's going to run the Q&A, I think, with Alison.
Oh, that's interesting, seeing the results of the poll. 41% have said other. Oh, I wonder what the other was.
Yeah.
And maybe we'll hear
I
about
thought
the
I'd
other
covered most of
questions.
the main things. Clearly not.
And we've had nobody who likes gas cooking, which is usually, yeah.
I had that in because I was doing an assessment Friday, and the chap was really keen to get off gas, but he's got 3 gas fireplaces and a gas cooker in the house, and I said to him, well, you're looking at replacing these, and he goes, oh no, my wife will never let me change any of them. It's like, well, you're gonna have to think about it if you want to get off gas, right?
Yes.
So it's just trying to find the right options that that people are comfortable with, because not everyone's comfortable with induction and things like that, because it does take a bit of practice. I mean, when I changed my cooktop over to induction from gas about 5 years ago now, my husband was a diehard gas cooking fan. It took quite a bit, and in the end I just said, no, we're not having it, and I just ordered it and told him it was going in, and wasn't happy, but I said, if you want gas, have a barbecue. So he did. And I tell you what, within a week, it was like, there's just no going back.
No.
Takes a bit of adjusting. Have you got one, Liz?
Yeah, we do. And we were the same. We, Sean loved cooking with gas, but I think once you actually get the hang of the induction, it's so responsive and it boils water so fast.
Yeah, but you have to adjust your cooking times.
Yeah, you got to learn a little bit, but once you get the hang of it, no going back.
But it's, again, you can phase an induction cooktop in as well, because you can get the portable ones, you can try it. Plenty of people I know that have just borrowed one or got a $40 one from Aldi or somewhere and tried it, and then just think about it a bit and then transition when they're ready or when they're redoing the kitchen.
Yeah.
So certainly the biggest thing I found with getting off gas is the heating side of things, where people, a lot of gas ducted systems around the place. And it's hard to sort of get away from that, getting up in the morning and the whole house is nice and warm, to transition to something where it's room by room, and maybe the pool will be cold in between, but you're only going from one room to the next room. So
Okay, so there are a few questions in the chat. So here's a question from Joe, which is, we have a solid brick 3-bedroom house with 10 floor registers, gas heating. Where do you go for advice? And I'll add to that, once you get rid of your gas ducted heating, what do you do with those holes in your floor caused by where your registers were?
you want to take this, Lucinda, or shall I?
Do you want to talk about the gas heating, and then I'll talk about the holes in the floor?
Sure. All right. So the gas ducted heating units, especially if it's been there for quite a while, it won't be particularly efficient, and transitioning off that will require a bit of consideration to how you want to use the house and how you like the house to be used, but I would not recommend reusing the ducts if you are going to go to a ducted system. Look, the most efficient thing to do would be to start putting in reverse cycle units in the main areas, start using those and get a bit of a plan in place, because a reverse cycle unit's a little bit more expensive when you're doing a whole house than it would be for a gas ducted system. But you usually find that you only need 2 or 3 rooms in a home to be conditioned in terms of heating and cooling, particularly heating. And the pricing for those will vary. I think you're probably looking up to around $2,000 for a supply and install of a reverse cycle unit, an efficient one, for like a bedroom or a medium-sized room. If you going to like a multi-head system, which is where you have 1 condenser unit out the side and up to 9 header units inside, they are very efficient, and you don't have like banks of condenser units building up around the side of the house. But the cost point in terms of the sweet spot between, do I get individual ones for each room or do I get one of those, is 3 rooms. So if you've got header units in 3 rooms or more, it's more cost effective to get the multi-head system. If you only got 2 or 3, 1, 2 or 3, it's usually more cost effective to just do individual units in each area.
So with the decommissioned vents, most of the people that I come across and talk to don't, because the vents are cut into tiles and floorboards and all sorts of strange things, and it's really hard to try and fix that up as if that hole wasn't there. So most people don't bother trying. They just take off the little vent cover, make sure there's no holes in the gap between where the vent is and the floorboard or the tile. So you might use a bit of a caulking gun to fill up any gaps, and then stuff some insulation or some pillow stuffing into that vent and leave it. Put the cover back on and just leave it. You really just want to block drafts. That's the key.
I think the trickiest part of Joe's question is, where do you go for advice? So, I mean, you can't.
For advice on how to upgrade, or?
Yeah, and how to make that transition to 3-bedroom home with gas ducted heating. How do you know who to trust or where to go?
You usually call one of us.
Yeah.
Because we're pretty impartial. We don't sell products, so we're not going to flog you something to get a commission. And it's really, one of us will come and probably do an assessment on the home, but based on what you've said, the recommendation probably wouldn't be much different to what we've just talked about. It would be, if you're happy to move across and transition to like individual systems for each room, and you can zone off each room appropriately, then it's worth just start staging in reverse cycle units as and when you can and when the budget works, and then at the end of the day, turn off and decommission the gas ducted system when you've got enough of the reverse cycle units and you're happy with them. I mean, it's not just reverse cycle units. I know a lot of people have issues with like cold bathrooms because ducted heating is often in bathrooms, and you do not, people just don't, it's not worth the money putting a reverse cycle unit into a bathroom. It's just silly. But there are other options. And the thing I tend to personally refer people to for bathrooms is the Herschel infrared heaters. And that's like an electric panel heater, so it doesn't blow air or anything like that. It can fit on the wall, it can fit on the ceiling. It can even have a dual purpose, like be a mirror and the heater, or it can be a towel rail and the heater. They're very, very effective. They're still more efficient than a gas heater, as it happens, and they plug into a standard power point mostly. So I would say look at something like that for those areas where it doesn't suit to have a reverse cycle unit. I mean, they're also very good, and you see them a lot in areas, outdoor areas like cafes and things like that, where you walk underneath. It's very much it's an infrared heat, so it's like being out in the sun. You walk out there and it heats the things in the room, not the air. So it's not so critical that the room that those heaters are in is like, doesn't matter if it's not particularly well sealed and there's a lot of ventilation, because it doesn't matter for those types of heaters. Those sort of having the house very efficiently draft proofed and insulated only matters for when you're conditioning the home, like heating or cooling the home, and it only matters when it's an air-based system, so you're heating and cooling the air as opposed to other things in the room. Hope that makes sense.
Over to Alison.
Okay, there's a question from Peter about insulation, and he says, for example, if he has R4 insulation in his roof, is there any benefit to adding additional insulation?
Oh, so do you mean he already has R4?
He's using that as an example.
Yeah, no. I mean, the minimum if you were building a new house would be R4.5, but based on that graph that you saw, by the time you're at R4, you'd be better off doing probably any number of other things like draft sealing and putting on better window coverings and all sorts of things. With making a plan, I feel like there's always a bunch of things on the list, and then you just shuffle them up or shuffle them down in levels of importance. And if you had R4 insulation, I would shuffle it right down to the bottom of the list.
Okay, there's kind of a follow-up comment on that from Liz. She said she's been reading about insulation cross-hatching.
Yeah.
Can you explain what that is and how it works?
Yeah, sure. And because as time goes on, the insulation minimum standards they keep increasing, and because the minimum standard now is quite thick, it's what is it, 24 centimeters, Danny?
Yeah, I think it's
four,
probably
roughly.
yeah, it'd be at least
Which is
24, 25.
quite a lot. And so say if you've already got maybe R2 or R3 insulation in your ceiling, it'll be possibly up to the top of the ceiling beams. And then what you would, if you added more on top, you would still have gaps where the timber beam was, and you don't want that. So you end up cross-hatching it so that it's at the other angle and then going right across. And that way you're covering the beams as well. Have I explained that properly? Danny, can you?
Yeah, you got to kind of think of insulation like a blanket. So like if you've got a blanket on your bed and it's got really good coverage and it's nice and even and everything else, it keeps you really nice and cozy and warm. The second you start to get the odd hole in it here and there, it completely detracts from how comfortable you feel and how warm you feel. And that's kind of how insulation works. And even with the beams and the cross-hatching is kind of like a way of putting another blanket over the other side to make sure that any gaps that might be there get sealed.
Any comment about the efficiency or lack thereof of gas-powered hydronic heating?
I can answer that because I have one of them. Right, so gas-powered hydronic heating is very good, and you see it particularly in homes where people have respiratory issues like asthma and things like that. Because it doesn't blow air around, it's very good for people with those sorts of issues. And a lot of people, especially if they're from Europe or anywhere, particularly like that type of heat. So the gas boilers that are attached to those, there's two types. There's a standard type and then there's a condensing boiler. The condensing boiler is more efficient because it reuses some of the waste heat in reheating the water. So if you're going to replace your gas boiler for a hydronic system, go for a gas condensing boiler. If you want to get off gas and go electric, the option is heat pumps, but they're super expensive and they don't retrofit very well at the moment to the systems. So what you find now is a lot of people if it's an underfloor system, the water temperature only gets to 30 degrees. So you can put in a heat pump system there for probably around $10,000 to $12,000. But if you're looking at wall panels, the wall panels need to get the water temperature up to about 70 degrees. And that requires a lot more energy and a lot more heating and a lot more pumping around through different size pipework. So at the moment, if you were going to do that, you would have to pay about $20,000 for a heat pump. And on top of that, they'll probably tell you have to upgrade your panels because the water doesn't get so hot. So your panels won't be as effective. So they'll tell you need bigger panels and bigger plumbing, which is just ridiculous when it gets to in terms of costs and how do you replace that. So my advice right now to people with systems like this is to just buy a time, keep whatever you've got there serviced and running. In about I reckon in the next 5 years' time, we'll have heat pump prices come down a bit, and they should be more retrofittable to existing systems without having to upgrade plumbing and wall panel sizes. If you've got a underfloor system, you should be able to do it now. So it'll just cost a bit.
There's a question from Anne. It's from Michael about heritage overlay restrictions on efficient installation of solar panels. Would you like to comment on that? Because I know a lot of people live in areas with heritage overlays.
Yeah, I met someone at the expo who had that exact thing, and their whole north-facing roof is facing the street. And they were told, no way, can't do it. I don't really know what to say about that. Do you, Danny?
Look, roofs like that on heritage listed properties where they're visible from the street and roofs that are slate, you'll really struggle to get solar on. The only real option for those properties if you want to put solar on somewhere is if you've got another bit of roof somewhere like an extension or a garage or something like that that's got reasonable orientation that you could put the panels onto instead. That's one option. But otherwise, no, there really isn't anything viable unless you go and do something like buy green power off the grid, but that's not generating your own power. Yeah, there's no real simple solution if you don't have the right roof orientation with the right structure and or you're caught with heritage listings issues. Yeah, it's a challenge.
It's quite an issue here in Boroondara because so much of Boroondara has got a heritage overlay.
Middle Park and Albert Park area too.
Right. This really is a question from me. I heard your comments about the Victorian energy upgrades that are available, like the draft proofing that isn't of quality. I've also personally heard that there are issues with the vents that cover your bathroom vents that open and close when you turn on your vent.
Draft
Do you have do you have can you comment on, do you have general concerns about the quality of that program, or and also specifically about those fan closers?
I think the program is amazing, and it addresses some really common drafts, and they potentially can benefit people hugely by getting them addressed. But to me, the issue is that the companies that offer these services are motivated not by getting a good result for the customer, generally, in my experience, and more by doing it very quickly and as cheaply as possible. And that's why often the products, like, I feel like every second house I go to, they say, yep, we got door seals put on, but then they left and then I couldn't close the door, so I took it off. And I hear this all the time, and I just think, well, what is the point if they, anyway, don't get me started on that. But I don't think it's the actual idea of it, I think, is fantastic, and I wish everyone would do it. But I've heard, for example, that in, I think it was New South Wales, they have a similar thing, but the householder has a co-contribution that they have to pay, and that means that they have buy-in. So if they then can't close the door, they're more likely to call the person back and say, hey, do this properly because I can't close my door. Whereas here, because it's completely free, like today, I went to a house who had been given all of these evaporative cooler vent covers. They didn't have an evaporative cooler. They had a refrigerated and gas ducted heating and cooling system. And they said that to the guy. They said, but we can't close these ceiling vents because we use it all year round. And he went, no, it's good. It's great. And gave them all these covers. So there's nothing wrong with the idea of covering evaporative cooler vents, but there is something wrong with providing them to someone who doesn't have them and claiming a
rebate. My view on the program is, I think it's a really good program. It's very well intentioned, like most of these government programs are. Downside is, if it can possibly be rorted, someone out there always finds a way to do it, which is really, really unfortunate, because these programs are, they are very well intentioned. They can have a really good impact. But the draft proofing is the one that I've noticed in Victoria is particularly, unfortunately, not good. But I have found that the shower replacements have been generally okay, and the putting the draft stoppers above the shower heads seem to have been okay so far, the ones I've seen. It's primarily the draft proofing and the vent covers, and the chimney balloons is the other one that I think is a complete waste of time. So,
but actually the draft, the shower heads, I've had a number where I'll finish my assessment and go, okay, I recommend that you change your shower heads. And they go, but we did that last week. And they've been installed without the flow restrictor. So they've been given new showers. And two of them said to me, we're running out of hot water now, more than we used to, because their shower heads are actually higher flow than before. The only issue, Lynn, I've ever had with the exhaust fan cover is someone who had them installed, and then they started getting mold in the bathroom, and her dad went into the roof and found out that it had been installed so it couldn't open, so she no longer had a functional fan. But that was the only one that I've heard of there. I just noticed a comment in the chat, Richard, saying that they had draft proofing done by Earthworker Cooperative, and it cost a bit, but it was done really well. And if you can afford it, I think getting someone like Earthworker or another professional draft proofer to do those jobs, it does cost a little bit, but you know that they're going to do a really nice job, and they won't leave your house until they've checked that the drafts are actually blocked, that the door closes, that everything's functional. So draft proofing is fantastic if you get it done right.
There's a question about the gas ducting vents in the ceilings. You talked about the ones in the floor, but how do you deal with the ones in the ceilings?
Decommissioned ones from you would just you probably want to get all the ductwork out of the ceiling just to allow you to be able to insulate properly, and then probably replastering the holes. Or a lower cost option would be just to put something in the ceiling over where those vents are, and then insulate over the top.
Well, you could just leave the vents. A lot of the vents screw closed. You could screw them closed in the ceiling and then just insulate them.
as long as they're physically blocked, that will solve the problem.
There was a question early on about the personal heater devices, and particularly the chair. Where do you find those?
Oh, just online or at homeware stores like Harvey Norman and places like that. They have a lot of different personal heating devices.
I've seen the blankets and things in at Kmart as well.
Yeah. The heated seat pad is brilliant.
There's a heated seat pad too. You can get online.
So I've noticed a comment from Liz in the chat that I know my house moves and I'd be worried that the door seals would work for a season and then not work anymore. And that's true. And a professional draft sealer, I think the products that they use are less likely to cause issues. I know that when they do the timber and compression seal perimeter seals on doors, they can actually handle some movement without that seal stopping working. Not always if it's significant, but they're better at it than the cheaper type of draft proofing products. Liz, while you're there, I just noticed you also said you had your scorecard report done and now you need to find good tradespeople. I'm assuming it wasn't through me or Danny.
No, it was from one of the other people who was at the expo.
Yeah.
Closer to me.
Usually that I would ask your scorecard assessor because that's...
Oh, yeah, I'm going to, but it's still a generic problem, basically.
Yes.
I mean, it's part of what's been worrying me all along. Every time I look at the Facebook group, someone's got a dodgy install of something.
Yes. Yeah. Your local clean energy, I'd ask the scorecard assessor, and some clean energy groups do have links with different installers of various kinds, and that's always a good way to go as well.
And Lucinda and I often include a list of trades that we know are good at various things in the reports that we send out, because because we don't take referrals or anything. Use them, don't use them, do it yourself, doesn't matter. But we know that getting the right trade in for the right job is always a challenge, and then that's why we include that as part of our reports, really. But yeah, do go back to him. He might know someone if he doesn't sing out, and I'll send you the.
Yep. It's a really important part of it, because that's the only thing that lets you make the next step.
That's right.
So just before we wind up with the questions, just to note that Electrify Boroondara is going to be looking next year at what we can do to provide people with more direction about appliance choice, and whether that's in the form of us doing a bulk buy or other method. That is something that we'll be investigating. And again, I think maybe just before we wrap up, if you could tell the audience exactly what it is that you do when you do a scorecard assessment, so they understand what that is. Because I mean, I'm quite aware that we have taken our home off gas, but we made some bad choices. And if we had gotten a scorecard assessor in earlier, we would have, I think, been much better off. But in any case, if you could just give us a quick outline.
Yeah. So generally, Danielle and I do it the same way. We begin with a conversation around the kitchen table with the householder and find out who they are, how they want their house to work, what type of appliances they have. If they've got a ducted system, how does it feel? Often people say, well, these rooms don't get warm and these rooms do, and these rooms are too hot in the summer, and that sort of thing. So how the house functions for them. Also what their goals are, if they're trying to get off gas, what budget they might have. Are they just trying to plan and wait till they have the budget, or are they wanting to do everything straight away? We try and get a really good feel of who they are so that we can make recommendations that fit. Then we look around the house and we collect all of our information to create the scorecard certificate. Danielle and I, though, both also write a tailored report. The scorecard certificate is a standardized 2-page document. So it's great in some ways because it gives you a snapshot of your home compared to other homes, but our tailored reports give a lot more information about specifically your home. and what you can do about things. So once we've collected all that information, we sit back down at the kitchen table and we go through everything from the building shell, zoning drafts, insulation of all kinds, window options, and we just talk through them. You know, today I know I was talking with people and they were saying, in this room, we don't really want to have window coverings because we really love the view of all the trees. So we talked about ways that they could perhaps fix up the window glazing in ways that they could afford. So it's a very personalized thing, isn't it, Danielle? It's about finding the things that will work for that house.
Yeah, exactly. Find out what works for them and what it is that they're trying to achieve within what sort of time frame. You know, we get a lot of people saying today, I've got a problem with this room, or I'm going to renovate this area of the home, or I'm about to change such and such over. And when I was in the other day, he was looking at doing a couple of things, and then at the end of the report, I said, well, I actually recommend you should do this, this, and this first. And he said, God, they weren't even on my radar. And I said, well, they'll make more of a difference than doing that. And you don't need to do that right now. You know, you'd be better off doing that later. So one of the things that, you know, we both do is provide a prioritized list of actions for people to take forward, starting with simple things and cheap things to the more expensive. We usually provide a succession plan of the key appliances in the home, like when this fails, replace it with that. And if you know, we quite often put in a transition off gas plan too. So like, you know, do this one last because this is the most efficient appliance in your gas appliance you've got. And it's quite often the hot water system, you know, the instant hot water systems, the gas ones are very efficient. So replace everything else. And if it's all a bit like for like, when it comes to gas, I always say remove the cooktop first because that gets gas out from inside the home and it's healthier. So it just comes down, it is very personalised, it is very comprehensive, it covers the whole building shell, including and all the key appliances. With us anyway, it doesn't matter if there's something particular you want to know about and it's not included on the scorecard, like I don't know, you've got a tropical fish tank or something, you know, you want us to pass comment on it, or you want to know if it's efficient, we'll pretty soon tell you. So just on that topic, tropical fish tanks, don't do it. Got to heat the water. The fish tanks, fine. Anyway.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I'll hand back over to Sophie.
Okay.
Thank you. Absolute heartfelt thank you, Lucinda and Danielle. That was absolutely brilliant. Incredibly practical and immediate. I think everyone probably feels the same way. I know I'm going to go and draft seal the coldest bathroom in Victoria. It's probably my first priority. But that, you know, it's really, really valuable information. And I think everyone, I could see people on screen madly writing things down. So we'll very much appreciate the slides too. For those of you who don't know, and I probably should have said this at the beginning, Electrify Boroondara is a community-led alliance, and we're passionate about accelerating the transition to clean energy, and particularly about electrification and teaching the community about how to electrify, how to get off gas, and how to make your homes more energy efficient. And we are always planning, we're always listening. So Lynn is about to run a poll, a final poll for the night, and we're just really keen to hear about this type of event and whether you'd prefer to be in person or on Zoom, and that will help us with this. We're planning a calendar of events next year, probably one a month. So alongside that, we'd love to hear from you. Write any comments you want to us. I'm just going to pop our email address in the chat, and love to hear your thoughts on tonight, on your experience with tonight, anything you'd like to know in future, any of the barriers that you find. We really rely on, you know, your input into the decisions that we make over the next few months. You know, we're building off a base. 1,200 people came to the expo, so we have a great mailing list, and we're just always keen to have that kind of two-way feedback. So I've popped the email address in. Our next event is likely to be, I imagine, in January, late January, and as I say, look out for that. We promote through our newsletter, so if you haven't joined up, please do sign up. It's on our website, and we have that treasure trove of information, as I said before. So all our events, we have an events tab, will be under that. And also we are pretty active on social media, and we would love you to follow us and share as well to spread the message. Thank you. Oh, wow, great participation on Zoom. Okay, 100% on Zoom. I think that's how we all feel too. I mean, it is a lot easier to get to and participate as well. So once again, I extend my thank you to Danielle and Lucinda, who've been great supporters of Electrify Boroondara, both at the Expo and by being our very first participants in a webinar. So thank you. That was amazing. A special shout out to Lynn Franks, who orchestrated this event and managed the tech and AV so well. Would have thought you'd done it a million times before. And also to Alison Wright for helping with the questions. Thank you all for all your active participation, and I really look forward to seeing you along the way, your journey of electrification and energy efficiency. Probably see you in 2024.